50 years ago this week, Father Frank Gilfillan and his committee, commemorating 50 years since the burning of Granard, put an advertisement in the Longford Leader. It began with a quote from Terence MacSweeney: "It is not those who inflict the most, but those who can suffer the most, who will conquer in the end." The ad continues: Town Hall, Granard, Tuesday, November the 3rd, 1970. Patriotic marches, ballads, songs, choruses. Music by Amplified Ceilidh Band. Lecture by Canon James Butler, PP, Drumlish, on the burning of Granard. I was fortunate to be part of that memorable night. O cóid an spéisiúil agus iontach a bhí ann. This evening, we are going to hear Father Butler's story, as told by him on the night, word for word. It will be read by Thomas Pettit, whose uncle Willie is mentioned kindly in the narrative.
I was 2 months here then, and going into the big house down there, the parochial house, which was very different from a cosy curate's house that I had in Clonfanlock. And there were devotions in the church on November Day, devotions that evening at the usual time, as we hear. And when I came out afterwards, I met Bernard Mackin, a farmer, who had a house in the town also. And he told me something of its history and his own interest in the choir. We came down together, parted at the parochial house, and I went in there, into a big room, pretty gloomy it seemed to me, and had tea. The Monsignor Maguire usually kept to his rooms then, and Father Lynch was probably out in his native home. After the tea, I went up to the sitting room that a curate had there, as well as a bedroom, and thinking there over the past, of course, and this unfortunate change that was made for me, it wasn't very long until I heard a tearing on the hall door. The hall door was opened and some people seemed to run in. There were girls and they went up to the parish priest's door. After that, the housemaid, Miss Midlin, came up and into my room and said, "There's a man after been shot in the hotel and there's a priest wanted." Well, strictly speaking, tonight isn't a commemoration party recalling events that were highlighted by the burning of the town and the terrorizing of its people who were cooperating for the fight for freedom of their country. It's a commemoration when we called to mind the young men of the parish and district who equipped themselves with arms and trained themselves to take an active part in the fight for freedom. In my mind, they are still young men, young as they were then. Larry Geraghty, Michael Mulligan, Tom Brady, and last of that group that I knew, and not least, Pat Cook. Some months after the burning of Granard, I called to a Higgins family out near Clonfin, and Mrs. Higgins said, "Sean McKeown slept here the night before the fight of Clonfin. I don't think," she said, "that he slept well, as she heard him come downstairs twice during the night to look at the clock." Now, 30 years before 1916, Parnell gave a short speech, the shortest he ever made, and it was in Cork City, and it was the eve of an election. He spoke from the window of a hotel, and there were thousands there to greet him. This is the speech he made. "Citizens of Cork, this is the night before the battle. To your guns then." Parnell's language then was figurative. There weren't guns to be used in war. It was an appeal then that justice might be done for the asking, for the begging, but it didn't happen that way. Easter Sunday night 1916 was the night before the Battle of Dublin, when guns spoke, and to that we owe our freedom as we have it today. Now, patriotism, we have all heard of it, we know of it. It is a virtue according to the definition, but merely human patriotism can go far astray. Unless our patriotism, south and north, becomes Christian soon, the outlook is black indeed, even in our time now. I have here just what happened and what I have mentioned already. Soon after I heard the knocking, as I told you, on the hall door, girls were screaming, and Miss Annie Medlin, the housekeeper, rushed into my room and said, "There was a man shot in the hotel." I got the necessary for attending him and went to the hotel. Inside, the dead man had fallen down in a sitting position. He was near the wall. I attended to him. His lifeblood flowed around him, and I had a certain fear of walking into it. There were two men there, I thought, in volunteer uniform. There were no words exchanged. Mr. Larry Kiernan came into the bar in a distracted condition. Later, Monsignor Maguire came and looked at the scene, and he said to me, I was the only one there then, "I'll notify the police and come back for you." And he did that. The police, when he went down, did not open the door, but they thanked him for giving the sad message. Next morning, Sunday, I heard loud talk on the street at daybreak. I looked out and saw 4 policemen on the footpath outside Stephen King's house and looking towards the parochial house. One man had only a shirt and pants on. All had guns. I went back to bed. In seconds, a bullet came through the window over the hall door and tore through the timber. 2 bullets came afterwards through a window in the room under mine, and pieces of plaster were scattered all around the place. Another shot came later, and that was the last. I had a mass in the convent that morning at 11:30. I passed the barracks twice. The head constable, who was now in charge, became a complete mental wreck and was taken away the next morning. On Sunday night, I was called down to the hall in the parochial house to meet 2 policemen. They had their rifles strapped on their shoulders, and their mission at the same time was partly friendly. Constable Healy, who lived in the town here, was one of them, and he said to me, "Tell Father Lynch to keep inside and out of our way for a few days." The other man, who had not spoken up to now, said, "If it's right to shoot peelers, it's right to shoot any man you believe ought to be shot." Healy said in reply, "Father Lynch has been a good friend of mine, and I am a policeman." Monday was quiet. The inquest took place, or what corresponded to it. On Monday, the funeral service took place outside the hotel. The parents of the deceased man were there, and one could see that the crowd felt for them in their serious loss or in their sorrow, despite the circumstances of the time. It was feared then that the burning would be that night and there would be a rush to the workhouse. All people who lived alone were taken there, and others who feared to stay in their homes because of their being in the bad books of the authorities. We were blessed to have a matron there at that time who was so efficient and kind, Miss Bridget Masterson, a native of the parish. There were few in such circumstances, but there was one heroine amongst us, Mrs. Bergham. She preferred to be called Liza. She picked up an old photo or a snap somewhere of Father Lynch. She attached it to a piece of cardboard and marched down the town. Outside the barracks, she stood and said, "The murder gang want to shoot Father Lynch. They can't do it. Oh no." They took no notice of her and they made no trouble, but she repeated the words. The very next day when the Tans came, they heard about it, and the incident didn't do any harm at all, because it made them, the policemen and the Tans, to think of this man, Father Lynch, and that he mustn't be a very bad man at all. The authorities didn't fuss about the incident. I think it did good. It was a heroic act that deserved to be noted. Heroes weren't so many among us at that time in the town here. But there is one boy that I think I mentioned, and that is Willie Pettit. Around that time, a wounded man was taken to Granard. He had to lose a limb, and his life also, unless he received immediate attention. There didn't seem a hope in the circumstances. Young Pettit was told of it and volunteered. Patsy Bradley from Fintona, a mechanic in Pettit's garage, fixed and tested a car, and Willie had his patient outside the Mater Hospital in less than 3 hours. An extraordinary thing about it was that while policemen were on duty in every village and town, they never stopped them on the journey. At that time, there were police on watch everywhere. Now, the homesteads on that occasion that went up in flames are the following: Pettit's, Kellett's, Kelly's the draper's shop, Michael Kelly's, Tierney's, Mackin's, Burns's, the Market House and Hall, O'Hara's, Curran's, Major's, Kiernan's Hotel and Warehouse, Cosgrove's, Heslin's, and there was a concert in the Market Hall just a week before for the foreign missions. The one person who suffered and died as a result of a gunshot wound was Mrs. Graham. Mrs. Graham lived, as you know, just below the bank house there. She was a very popular person, and she owned a house with a history. It was called a house of hospitality, and was in that sense a kind of hotel for 100 years before. And she certainly was worthy of it, and it was a house of hospitality in her time. On the occasion when the shots were fired into the parochial house there was shot fired into Graham's house. She was wounded in the foot and died from blood poisoning in a short time. Now, as regards the burning itself, it was around midnight that the cavalcade came from Dublin to burn the place, and they placed a line of vehicles across the street from Donoghue's to Drum's. They discharged several volleys of machine gun fire down the town to clear the streets, and then the burning began. And all those houses that I have mentioned were destroyed on the occasion. What took place after that, of course, you know it. You have heard it. There was nothing very extraordinary, no historic events for some time, at any rate, and things went on just as before. It was a long time before any effort was made to rebuild the houses that were ruined. A young man accidentally lost his life in the neighbourhood, Patrick Smith. He was shot accidentally, and because of it, an ambush took place. A kind of an ambush on the same occasion here in the town. And if it were known that he was wounded, well, there would certainly have been a lot of inquiries. So it was agreed anyway that he was gored by a bull. The sergeant who came after the trouble and the burning was a peaceful man, a man of peace, and he agreed to let the thing be ended, just as we said. It was thought, I think, with some people that it was a history of the burning and all that I was to give. It is merely my own experience in it and during it, and as I said, the young men that I knew then. They are in my mind's eye still, as they were then, in a house, as I told you about, Sean McKeown's preparation for the Battle of Clonfin. He wrote to me kindly about the business, and I have to say that history belongs to those who made it. And I hope we shall have that history. And it is a proud history for the parish and for the people who participated in it. My own experience ends there. The convent was very kind to those in need on the occasion, and there was a welcome there for people in need and for people who wanted or required consolation. And I have happy memories of the parish of Granard and its people, both alive and those who are gone.